Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you this night for our lives, for our schools, for our work colleagues, schoolmates, and the OAA. We thank you for making it possible for us to gather once again to speak about how to prepare towards our 100th anniversary and the next. We commit friends, other dignitaries on their way towards here. Permit them from the way, grant them traveling mercies. Put us all together. Those of us who are here, grant us the spirit to learn, relearn, and unlearn, that we may go home with something new. To our students who are in the stead learning to take up the place, grant us the grace that we may learn the traditions of the school. We put and place before you our speakers, commentators, dignitaries, chairpersons, and all. By your power and providence and grace, may this program start with success and end in glory. In the name of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, have we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Thank you very much, the Reverend. Let me welcome you to this evening's program, Achimota Speaks. Earlier in the year, I'm sure you all received information about Achimota School turning 95 in terms of its formal opening by the governor. So, we are very happy as old Achimotas and current Achimotas to celebrate 95 years. We also see as an opportunity to prepare for the centenary celebration in another 5 years. So we thought the best way to prepare ourselves for the centenary celebration was to have this program, Achimota Speaks, which we first began when Achimota turned 95 years ago. So today is simply a continuation of what we started 5 years ago. We chose as theme, preparing for Achimota 100, secondary education for the next century. And the main reason for choosing that theme is because of the conviction that secondary education in Ghana is in considerable turmoil. And if we don't do anything about it, it will get even worse in the next century. So, as Achimotans, how do we think together with others? The problem with secondary education is not confined to Achimota School. It's a very widespread problem around the world, and also here in Ghana. So today, we have invited people who know something a lot about education, and also people from other schools who know a lot about education, to share with us their experiences, their thoughts, their suggestions. The reason for inviting all the different speakers lies because of what they bring to the table. We chose 3 old Achimotas from different generations. So we have an ancient, one not so ancient, and then one, I don't know how to be technically correct. Modern. Okay. So modern, not so ancient, and then ancient. business programs that we put together. Let me proceed now to introduce the chairman and then the speakers. Our chairman for today is Nana Tusutribi Rabi Asante, also known as Dr. S.A.B. Asante. Nana is the paramount chief of Santes Authority and is doing private life as Dr. S.A.B. Asante. He's a legal practitioner with the following degrees: LLB Honors from Law, as I was 1956, and LLM from the University of London 1958, and Doctor of Juridical Science from Yale University Law School in 1965. He was educated at Achimota School, Achimota School, Nottingham University, UK King's College, and the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies in London and Yale University Law School. He was a pioneer lecturer in law and acting head of the law department at the University of Ghana from 1962. He participated in the establishment of the law faculty at the university. He was also a lecturer in law at Leeds University Law Faculty. He did a visiting member of the law faculty at Cambridge University and an adjunct professor at Howard University Law School, Washington, D.C., and a visiting professor of law at Temple University. And is very well known for his role as Solicitor General of Ghana and Deputy Attorney General 1969-1977. He also served as attorney with the World Bank of Washington, D.C. He was chairman of the Committee of Experts that formulated proposals for the 1992 Constitution of Ghana. As an active national administrator and a member of the ICC Court of National Administration in Paris, as well as several other big institutions. He's a fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, honorary fellow of the Society of Advanced Legal Studies, UK, fellow and past professor of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, life member of Clare Hall, Cambridge University, and chairman of the newly established Ghana Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and also chairman of the Institute of Financial Law and the board of Shawbell Consultants. And also a member of the Judicial Council of Ghana and chairman of the Examination Committee of the Judicial Council. He's currently a member of the National House of Chiefs of the National Peace Council. And is a recipient of the Ghana National Book Award for Distinguished Writers and the National Honor Order of the Water Officer category. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome our distinguished chair for the evening, Nana. Our first speaker representing the Asian group is an engineer, Dr. Bami Ajimamawachi, who has spent about 45 years in technology, primarily telecommunications and ICT, in roles ranging from research to executive management. He is the chief executive of Equiformatics, an ICT consulting company he founded, and the chairman of the council, Sunyani Technical University, and director of the foundation, CEO of Backbone Connectivity Network, a fiber optic networking in Nigeria, and chairman of Balance Solutions, director of Associated Consultants, and the past president fellow of the Ghana Institute of Engineering. He serves on the executive committee of the OA. Dr. Wati previously served as vice president and chief technology officer for Harris Corporation and AT&T Paradigm in the US, having begun his career at AT&T Bell Laboratories. He also served on the technological advisory committee of the US Federal Communications Commission and consulted for UN agencies, Research Technologies, Florida Research Council, and various university industry boards. He was at the University of Ghana as a lecturer and headed the computer science department, served on the University Council, and was instrumental in the establishment of computing in Ghana. That's our first speaker. second speaker I can't find the profile of our second speaker. While I fix the so the third speaker, who is the youngest, is a doctor, a diplomat, a diplomat. She holds a PhD, an MSc in economics from the School of Economics, University of Rotterdam, and a BA in economics with geography from the University of Ghana. She is currently a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, teaching various courses in economics. Prior to her joining the University of Ghana Business School, she worked with Darrow Business School of the UK as a teaching fellow for 3 years, lecturing in various courses. She also served as a country program manager for the Bloomberg Media Initiative Africa Financial Journalism Training Program. She is a development economist with special interests in micro, small, and medium enterprises, monetary and financial economics, economic growth and development, corporate governance, and gender diversity. She has published several papers in reputable journals, has consulted for various organizations both locally and internationally. Is affiliated with the Liverpool Center for Research on Globalization and Economic Policy and the British Accounting and Finance Association. Is married with a daughter. So, while I figure out what to do about acceptance speaker, let me go to the first discussant. Mr. or Captain Portfolio. Paul became a pilot at age 18. Became an instructor, examiner, test pilot, chief pilot, and deputy chief executive technical of Ghana Airways. Thereafter, he flew as a captain on the B-747 with Saudi Arabian Airlines. After 36 years flying, Paul has for the past 11 years been the managing director of Beer Plantations, engaged in the reforestation of our natural forests. He holds a very degree in airline management, was president of the Ghanaian Airline Association, and vice president of the International Federation of Airline Association, and since 2015, being the illustrator of the Atlantic World Work Association. Our second discussant is Mrs. Christine Irabina, president of the Every World Association. She's a legal practitioner by training with over 35 years working experience in administration and as a lawyer in both private practice and public service. Mrs. Larkin is currently the legal director at the Ghana Free Zones Authority. Prior to joining the PFS, she worked in the banking and communication sector in Ghana. Christine graduated from the University of Ghana, having completed the O and A levels at Every Girls Secondary School and Holy Child School and Post, respectively, and later obtained a law degree from the Ghana School of Law. She is an executive member of African Women Lawyers Association and has been involved in the advocacy for gender balance and equality since being called to the bar. She was the Ghana coordinator for the British Institute of International and Comparative Law on the application of the death penalty in Commonwealth Africa, and is a charter member of the Rotary Club of South, where she has held several positions over the years, including president. Now let me find the profile for our second speaker. second speaker is Dr. Mary Shen. She joined the Ghana National School in 2014 and is currently in her 8th year of leading the school to transform how it teaches, learns, collaborates, and grows. Prior to joining GIS as principal and head of school, she was a school principal in Canada and taught chemistry, biology, and maths for several years in Canadian schools. Mary also lectured at Redeemer University, Ontario, in the Faculty of Education, teaching and supervising pre-service and in-service teachers. Mary holds a BSc from University of East London, a BEd from University of Toronto, a PhD from State University of New York, Buffalo, and is a Einstein Fellow of the School of Education, Columbia University in New York. She's active in the Association of Internationally Certified Schools, ASICS, in Ghana, and as a council member, the board member of the Association of International Schools in Africa, and the chair of the advisory board, Young Africa Works, MasterCard Foundation's new strategic task with reducing youth unemployment in Africa. Mary is a creative. She writes novels and short stories, with 13 published so far, musicals, 3 of them, and most recently, My Trip had its last one published. It's executive produced the student production of Nobel laureate University play Death at the King's Mosque. Mary is married to Joe, and they have 3 adult sons. So we have the profile of all of our speakers and the chair. Let me invite them here to join us. I think we will need another, and so I bring the next speak for us. Please, the chair speakers come to the social here. Paul, please come to big dinner. Please come. Now we have the panel fully assembled. Before I invite Nana to open the event, I'm very happy. I'm sure many of you have seen in Ghana at the moment we went to visit the school, Mr. Anders Fraser, who is the grandson of Alexander Fraser, one of founders. Anders is in town, and today we are quite honored to have him join us. And Fraser means a lot to Achimota School. We in Ghana are old students of the school and some current students of the school. We are very honored that his great-grandson, the grandson of great-grandson, has found it fitting to come and pay us a visit. So we are extremely happy to welcome you to Ghana. In those remarks, let me now turn it over to Nana to give us his opening remarks. I'm quite sure you can see the program that I've given everybody specific number of minutes to speak. And I can speak as long as you like.
President and members of the OAA executive, apparatus, old and young, students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would first of all like to thank the executive of OAA for giving me the honor of inviting me to chair this event. And I would like to thank Accra, the President, for his kind words about me. My job has been simplified by the limitation of time. I've been given 5 minutes to say something. I think it's a long introduction, biographical introduction, compensates for the limitation of my time. Some time ago, 15 years ago, when I was invited as a representative of Asians and Achimotas of the State and University Reservation, I complained that I was not mentioned at this time. About 32 years time, I cannot complain. Now, as an ancient apparatus, I cannot speak or address the future. An ancient person, by definition, is qualified to reflect on the past. So my intention today was to give you some idea of what the younger ones, what I try to do. Can you hear me? Not too well. Is it better? Hello, can you hear me? All right. So I'll give you some idea of what Achimota tried to do within the past first 25 years of the existence to prepare the way for my younger colleagues to give their prognosis of future of secondary education. The basic structure of Achimota as envisaged by the founding fathers was a co-educational establishment comprising kindergarten, primary and secondary schools, teacher training, agricultural, technical and medical education, which would ultimately be developed into a university college. Achimota was to expose its students to the modern disciplines of science and technology while ensuring an African orientation of the college. I'm not going to read everything I have here, not even a page, because of the limitation of time. But the idea was that secondary education, the first class secondary education will be offered without compromising the maintenance of a rigorous international standards. The idea was that Achimota would be provided secondary education in the African context without compromising the maintenance of rigorous aiming of a full university status was a long-term project, but in the meantime, Achimota will offer not only a first-class secondary department, but also a degree college and other institutions. As a matter of fact, the process went further in the engineering department, which actually prepared students for external engineering degrees of London University. Our first engineers like R.P. Bafo, Latte, Kumi were all trained at Achimota in the 1930s. So Achimota saw itself as a crucible of development, addressing every aspect of national development and nation building. Human development will not be complete without the inculcation of discipline and wholesome values derived from both African and Western cultures, such as loyalty and integrity. Achimota was also represented national integrating at the highest level. Tribalism was frowned upon. So this will give you some idea of what Achimota tried to do. I can elaborate on it during the chairman's concluding remarks. But I would like to end by congratulating the executive of OAA for having the vision to think ahead. This time we are using the motto, thinking ahead of secondary education for the next century. It's a highly commendable thing. This reminds me of my international experience in Korea, South Korea, some more than 50 years ago when I was working for the World Bank. I was sent together with the other representatives of the bank and IFC and even private banks to go and establish the Korea Development Finance Corporation. Now, the history of Korea since then, 1968 was the time when the Koreans were emerging from the war, the Korean War. Korea was a poor country. Its per capita income was no higher than that of Ghana. Today, Korea is a developed country. It's the 12th largest economy. Its students are among the best of the OECD countries in mathematics and science. And Korea is the 12th largest economy, even bigger than Russia as an economy. So thinking of education is very important because economists say that one of the critical components, one of the ingredients of Korea's strategies was training an educated workforce. Educated workforce was critical to Korea's economic takeoff. So I congratulate our executive and all concerned with it for having the vision to think ahead. My only prayer is that what comes from this deliberation will also influence policy makers. Thank you very much.
President, since I'm representing the ancients, greetings from the land of the spirits. And also need to do a mea culpa up front. I've noticed that with age, my ability for brevity goes down significantly. And gone are the days when I could go to Silicon Valley and deliver my 30-second elevator speeches and convince investors to invest in technology companies. I find that I tend to be a lot more wrong-winded these days. So please forgive me, and Accra President, I can punish you. A chairman, I cannot punish. So, anyway, Accra Chairman, Accra President of the Accra Chairman of the School Board, honorable members of government and other dignitaries here present, the headmistress, the staff of Achimota School, fellow speakers and discussants, fellow Accras, Achimota School students who are the future leaders of Ghana, members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I feel most honored today to stand before you on behalf of all the Accras on this beautiful occasion to kick off the 95th Founders Day celebration in the Achimota School Centennial. Some of us may not see the centennial, so we'll take advantage of this and deliver what we can right now. I'm truly grateful for the invitation to participate in this symposium on secondary school education in the next century. This gives me an opportunity to share some thoughts on how our dear nation can innovatively plan for secondary education in the next century. Secondary school education has become the pivot on which one is ushered into the next phase of life, be it continuation of academia or learning of skills and acquiring training. Therefore, it is important that secondary school education in the next century be critically looked at. How can we take advantage of the availability of a lot of learned discourse on education and the exploding development in science, technology, engineering and mathematics, STEM, to uplift the lives of our people? Without a visionary but implementable secondary school education system, winning the war against poverty, disease, illiteracy, and environmental degradation will be a pipe dream. And Ghana will be severely hampered in its aspiration towards sustainable development. Let me start by thanking the many people who have helped in the preparation of this presentation. And I'd like to acknowledge some very special people. Upmost is what I call the indomitable Accra Ivan Dynasty, who has written extensively on the subject. And he was quite liberal with giving me some of his papers to look at, and also for that I'm truly grateful. And incidentally, he's of the 1960 year group, so he's my senior. Other contributors are my classmate and bosom friend, engineer Kofi Asagawa, who's sitting right over there, and Kofi Adin, my friend, and he has been with me through thick and thin. In fact, one of the happy discoveries of Achimota. My encyclopedic classmate and Aspire alumnus, he's also a Renaissance man, Dr. Hussein Prashant, and he's probably watching on YouTube somewhere. My intellectually brilliant cousin, but quiet achiever, the well-known retiree Accra Yawesu, the 1974 year group. And my long-term friends, Accra brothers, Accra Tedikolu, who I've been with for quite a long time. He was a year my junior in the class of 1964. And also Accra Charles Robin. Accra Charles Robin, that most people refer to as Tarzan. And he's very sharp-witted and is definitely unconquerable. And also my assistants who helped me put all of this together. And last but not least is my greatest prize from Achimota, my dear wife, Lydia, who is sitting right over there, who has been transformed from Lydia to Pachi. It is increasingly increasingly being universally acknowledged that the most prized asset of any country is its human capital, and education is indispensable. If this asset is to be kept current, competitive, and optimally deployable. Indeed, any nation that ignores education effectively concedes progress and is prepared to condemn its people to what I call the abyss of poverty and hopelessness. The linkage between human capital and socio-economic development is brought into sharp focus by the paradox contrasting the poverty but natural resource endowed nations such as the sub-Saharan African countries which live in poverty. Contrast them with the affluence of those limited in natural resources but rich in human capital. And our chairman spoke of one earlier, Korea, Japan, Singapore, and so on and so forth. That is one of the paradoxes of the modern world. Education is a key to the development of human capital, be it for individual self-actualization or national economic productivity. It provides the individual with more opportunities while the society at large gains a more enlightened and capable citizen. Producing, increasing, and improving intellectual capital increases social cohesion as well as the productivity of the workplace. An educated workforce is undoubtedly the engine to natural economic growth. And since secondary school education has become the pivot for which individuals are ushered into the mature phase of life, be it continuation of academia or learning of skills, it is important that secondary school education in the next century be critically looked at for the good of our nation and individual personal fulfillment. Indeed, I would like to motivate my discussion by asking each of us a question. Where would we be today but for our education generally, and specifically the good secondary school education that we receive at Achimota and elsewhere? I, for one, can confidently say that I owe much of what I am today to Achimota School, which liberated me from Ashtown Massacre. This evening, I would like to examine the centennial tenure of our secondary education system from the following perspectives. And I will look at what the goals and objectives for secondary school education should be. In the next century, of course, as a reference, I'll also very briefly look at the Ghana situation and then make some recommendations for the next century and end on the so what for Achimota School. Today, I was going to come here and display my technology with my iPad and everything. And I pick it up and it didn't work. As expressed by Wikipedia, education is generally viewed as a process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals, beliefs, habits, and personal development. This has been going on since the beginning of time. As one generation sought to pass on this experience to the next. The process over time has become formalized and institutionalized. And institutions have been developed to carry out the mission. The school system in many societies is at the core of that endeavor. The secondary school plays a pivotal role since this is the stage where members of society are ushered into adulthood. Of course, it must be noted that there is also informal education which is carried out in a less structured manner. The recognition of the critical role that education plays, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals explicitly define Goal 4 for education, and it states, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Some think that education should be about making sure that the individual gets equipped with the knowledge and skill and ability to decide what to do with their lives. But many more share the view that this must be augmented by other attributes. And these attributes include how to live in a society, self-reliance, and citizenship. I believe that the purpose of education should be the development of individuals to benefit society. The goal of education is actually simply captured by one of the founders of Achimota Speaks, James Emmanuel. That education should be about the development of the head, the heart, and the hand. That is a profound statement. The head provides intellectual faculty, while the heart provides emotional intelligence, empathy, moral values, beliefs, and appreciation of society, teamwork, and understanding of the common origin and responsibility. The hand helps to transform the intellectual gains modulated by the awareness of humanity to provide utilities for self and society in an efficient manner. For example, the use of the hand goes a long way in promoting self-reliance. The head, supported by the hand, has the capability to provide for what I refer to as smart individuals or individual excellence, while the heart, supported by the hand, can help to translate smart individuals to smart institutions and individual excellence to group excellence for society. And this is important because if you have a society which is full of self-centered, excellent individuals, you're not going to make a whole lot of progress. And incidentally, this is exactly the problem that we face in Ghana and most of Africa. We have individual excellence but group incompetence. And we have not managed to find a way to translate our individual excellence to group capability. That's a major challenge for the society. Secondary school education today has been characterized by a smart nature, essentially one size fits all, uniform pays for all, fixed duration regardless of individual ability, emphasis on testable subjects, fact figures, and mostly road learning. Curriculum reassigned and reflecting existing knowledge, limited room in curriculum to reflect new discoveries or new ideas, and continuous assessment is not part of graduation requirements. The final examination over a short time duration determines the fate of students who have been in school for many years. That one exam essentially determines fate. The system also emphasizes compliance and conformity over creativity, two skills that are necessary to do well in a professional or corporate environment and to hold on a good job for decades. Such a system can at best teach students what is prescribed. As a result, students talented in other areas never have the opportunity to discover those talents. Thus, the system results in a population of similar skills in a narrow spectrum of talents. Among the reasons for the relative inflexibility of the system is how to provide for many more people with the limited resources available to many countries. Allowing individualization generally increases the cost of living. However, this is being ameliorated by technologies such as the internet, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. And in so doing, help the push to the next century secondary school education. Ironically, technology is also causing the discontinuity, thus accelerating the obsolescence of the existing system. The easy access to information has made doing things less useful. For example, in the changing workplace, making use of information is more valuable than merely knowing it. Other contributors to the discontinuity include globalization and also the requires to provide solutions. Finally, the secondary school industry has many stakeholders. I think we put out a PowerPoint chart and this is the chart that talks about the stakeholders in the industry and the relationship among themselves. This is important because later on we talk about the role of institutions like GES and so on. This chart. And this includes policymakers. Everyone of them is a policymaker. And that's typically the government. Even the regulators, which are government agencies, and GES actually should be a regulator, not an operator, which they seem to increasingly get themselves into. And the operators are the ones who are engaged in the day-to-day operation. And they are also partners, in the eco. They are also partners who help in delivering the service. And for secondary schools, these partners are entities like specialized schools, basic schools, the suppliers, the vendors, consultants, private tutors, and so on and so forth. Then there are what I call the value-added providers. Then you have the service users. The service users obviously are the students, the parents, the tertiary institutions, the basic schools, and various associations which relate to the school. There's also things like Teachers Association, PTAs. We also have another layer of association. The ecosystem and the roles for the various in the invisible chart that is out there. Colonial, now let me say a couple of words about education in Ghana. Colonial education in Ghana was provided by religious missions. In 1961, the pre-independence government of Parliament introduced accelerated development. Excuse me? Education, and among the provisions were free tuition at the elementary school level for children between the ages of 6 and 12. And very importantly, maintaining subsidization of mission schools by government to ensure efficiency. We seem to have lost track of all of that in a sense. This led to a tremendous increase in middle school, secondary school, and so on and so forth. Since then, under the theme of educational reform, the system has been as I said, I've done it before. And improving equitable access for all children, transitioning from mostly mission-based schools to joining mission and other sector-related schools. With all these reforms, sometimes it appears that the relevant type of education required for the country continues to review their needs. Let me look at the new world. Many young people today are digital natives. The internet, smartphones, and iPads have been part of their lives, and they are comfortable with using apps and codes as their parents and grandparents were flipping pages. This means growing up with unprecedented amount of information at their fingertips, with everything just a quick search away. They can teach themselves about any topic they're interested in without leaving their bedrooms. Ironically, some of these same digital natives cannot easily tell whether the balance of the pages is correct, something that an illiterate market woman can easily accomplish. With so much information readily available, the focus of the next century education should be more on making sense of the information, sharing it and using it in smart ways. It should be about giving students the skills that they need to succeed in this new world, confidence, practice. Fundamental skills such as literacy and numeracy remain important foundations for all future learning. In addition, there is a need to focus on skills such as adaptability, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, communication, and collaboration, as well as learning to be a global citizen in the world where technology is erasing borders. Teachers need to serve as guides or mentors with the student, not as all-knowing saints providing them with all their information. Children are going to know more than their teachers. The teachers have to be ready for that. The topics for which the students are better informed than you are. How do we accomplish all of this? First, we should look at running the education system as a partnership between government and other stakeholders. I believe that we should look at the PPP model for education, having tax and conditions the same way that we do for the other PPPs. This would allow and indeed encourage the churches, mosques, and other stakeholders who in many instances are closer to the community and the Ministry of Education to re-engage in the provision of education. In line with this, we should restructure the ministry and the GES currently. The monopoly that they enjoy should go down. The GES should focus on its primary regulatory role. For example, senior high schools that meet well-known criteria will be given more autonomy. This will free the ministry to concentrate on the schools which require more help. Second is to develop a national imperative for STEM. Beyond the usual rhetoric, we need to make sure that Ghana is very well positioned to move us into the technology age. And there are many other things that we should be considering. But let me talk about the implications for Achimota School. Beyond the general recommendations, Achimota School can undertake steps to facilitate its journey to the next century. Most notable, it needs a patron to work with the government. If we are going to use the PPP model, then clearly you need somebody who will be the partner to government. If you look at the other schools, they have natural patrons. For example, the mission schools, the natural patron is a church. Achimota does not have such a natural patron. And this is one of the things that we need to look at. And Achimota School needs to come up by looking at the OA, the school board, the school administration, all the operators. We need to treat this as a matter of urgency. Because if indeed the government is willing to do a PPP, who do they sign the contract to? And it turns out that the only entity with permanent interest in Achimota School is the OA. So the OA should be designated as the partner to government. And toward that end, in fact, this is what makes the endowment fund even more important. Because if you are going to be the patron, you need the resources to be the patron. And it is things like the endowment fund that will make it possible for the OA to stand up and indeed be the patron. I've talked about, and as I said, with age, I seem to be able to not control my brevity as much as I used to do. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, our mission as a country that aspires to maintain leadership position on the African continent requires a vision of development which fully ushers in our schools in the next century. The secondary schools require special attention, as I have said, and if we need guidance, we don't need to look any further than our own founder, and his emphasis on the head, heart, and hand. And this will help us to accelerate the development. And when we do look at the Ghana system, Ghana has come through a lot of changes, and we are still struggling. We've gone from O-level, O-level and A-level to SSS, JSS, to SHS, who knows, the next one will be ABCCD. All of that just suggests that over the years, we don't seem to have found stability in what we see as what our education should be. And finally, I would like to emphasize that this idea of the PPP, people need to push down. Because PPP is a problem that is pretty well understood. And we have had a lot of success deploying the PPP model in other areas, why not in education. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you will continue.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Poitier, who referred to me as contemporary Accra, but I don't think that's what I'm supposed to be. I think I'm the almost ancient one. Thank you so much for inviting me here, Accra Chair and Professor Aite, all protocols observed. I'm excited to be here to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart. As you know, I'm an Accra class of 85, proudly a Clark House girl. Do I hear them? Anyone here? Clark House girls, where are you? Okay, a couple right there. I'm one of those people who attempted to join the cadet corps and fainted at the cadet square because I couldn't hack it. Somehow I made it to the choir, and to this day I don't know what King Halfway of Blessed Memory heard, because I think they were just short on choristers, and that's why they allowed me. I love my school. I have always loved it. Actually, no, I didn't love it too much in Form 1 and 2. I couldn't wait to leave because it just seemed so difficult. And then as we grew older, it got more exciting. And I think it's after you leave that you realize what a treasure the school was for you. I'm going to pick up from where Dr. Boachi left off. He mentioned 21st century skills, and I want to refer us to what the World Economic Forum says is going to be needed in the 21st century. And they've grouped them into 3 categories. There's the foundational literacies, the competencies, and the character qualities. So the foundational literacies: literacy, numeracy, scientific literacy, ICT literacy, financial literacy, and cultural and civic literacy. When it comes to competencies, this is how students approach complex challenges: critical thinking and problem solving, creativity, communication, collaboration. And then the last one is character qualities. Sometimes you're driving on the road and you ask yourself, do we need to be taught certain things? And you wonder, who raised some people? Because the character is sorely missing. And while it's important to inculcate this in curriculum, it is sad that we have to do this in school, because the home should be where all of these are inculcated. In school, we should be augmenting whatever is being taught at home. Curiosity. So instead of yelling at a child when the child says, but why? Even if you don't know, you tell the child, I'll come back to you and I'll tell you why. Instead of saying, go away, you're making too much noise. Go outside. Initiative, persistence or grit, adaptability, leadership, social and cultural awareness. Education happens through experiences. So as I'm thinking about this topic, I'm asking myself the question, how can we give secondary school students these learning experiences? What tools and resources do they need? Who needs to be teaching them? What qualifications will they need? How will we know when they are ready? How do children learn? And therefore, how must we teach? I know that a lot of the conversation can veer into the area of funding, because really we need money to run things. I know that funding is a key driver, and this funding can often come from government, from alumni, from endowments, from private private-public partnerships, as Akrabachi mentioned, and then the collective voices of school leaders, not just in Ghana, but around the world. But I want us to come to this realization that even without money, people are doing amazing things. Money does make things a whole lot easier, but when you put a dynamic individual in front of a group of children, the bell will go and the children will keep sitting in the classroom because they can't wait to listen to what that person has to say. We call ourselves the pace setters. That means we must be first in all things. So we have to develop a certain mentality that screams pace setter. Everything we do must point to the fact that we will get first. We will continue to be first. Well, how do we do this? First of all, is a certain structure. You need to create a structure within which success can be recognized. For us, we see this in a well-appointed school board. A board that is diverse, not just in the way that people look, not just in the agenda, but diversity of thought as well. We should not be afraid of people who think differently from us, but people who can challenge us and push us to question all the things that we have held dear for so many years. For many of those ideas, we've never really stopped to think about them, we've just accepted them. But maybe that was for a certain time, and we are in a new age. We need to have strategic plans that speak to that pace-setter mentality. I was invited to speak to the Kita Secondary School board, and imagine me being quite surprised to see an incredibly well-thought-out strategic plan. But then again, we all know what Kita did most recently, right? And what were we doing? We were learning. Instead of learning, let's put a plan together. If we want to be the best at something, we've got to put a plan together. Our environment needs to have facilities that are built for purpose or redesigned for purpose. And in this regard, the OAA has been doing a fantastic job in rallying the year groups to work together and to put things in place for our students. We hope that they are grateful and that one day they will do the same to those who come after them. Our campus is so well designed. I've seen an aerial view where you've got the admin block and all that in the center with the Agri Chapel. Then you've got the houses just within the oval, then you've got the master's houses around them. For me, that whole concept of that center of learning happening on campus right in the middle, and the protective nature of the facilitators, the teachers, the administrators, encircling the students is a wonderful, wonderful design. And we have Gordon Fraser's great-grandson, right, over here, and we thank him and all those pace setters who set the school up for us. Are we using these facilities well? And are we maintaining them well? Use of the natural environment to facilitate learning and well-being. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we walked onto campus and we saw students sitting in the arboretum studying, or reading, or just sitting? Wouldn't that be wonderful? We'll be using the natural environment. And my class of 85 and the class of 75, our legacy project is to revive the arboretum. It will no longer be just for gating. It will also be used for other kinds of learning. What about our teachers? Our teachers need to be engineered to reduce probable failure. German cars are well engineered, and we all say that. What does it take to actually put something like that together that engenders trust in the buyer? So if I put a teacher who has been well put together, well engineered in front of students, there's going to be no mistaking that this teacher has been well engineered. And then we need to maintain that teacher with professional development to increase the life cycle and productivity of that teacher. We moan about our maintenance culture or the lack of it. What does that mean when it comes to teachers? If a teacher goes through an entire year without having gone through any professional development, on classroom management, on strategies that help them to manage a class and to deliver engaging lessons, something's going to happen in the class. Children are going to switch off. Those who are able to sneak their phones into the classroom, what are they going to be doing? Right there on their phones. And when it's almost time for the class day, you see students packing up. They're ready to go because there's nothing to gain from staying there any longer. We need to maintain our teachers better if we're going to be moving into the next century. And then focus on well-being, asking ourselves, what is our school culture? Are people content to be working here? Do we allow people to grow? How do we nurture talent instead of killing it? We need to be asking ourselves these questions because our students can tell when a teacher doesn't want to be there. Our students can tell. Right, students? That was a very resounding yes. I remember in probably my 6th or 7th year teaching, I finished and I was packing up in the lab, I was teaching chemistry, and a student walked into my class, he was in grade 11, and I asked if he had left anything behind, and he said no. And I said, do you have a question about the homework? He goes, no. And I said, so? And he said, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, sure, what's the problem? And he said, I just want to know why you teach us like you don't want to be here. And I remember thinking, if I was white, I would blush. I was so ashamed because I really didn't want to be there. I was getting tired. I wasn't getting support from the administration. I felt like nothing I did was good enough. And so I started switching off. And this particular student, I had taught him in grade 7. He was now in grade 11. He remembered me when he was in grade 7. And I was that teacher who wanted to blow up the school. That teacher who said, we're not going to sit in the classroom, let's get out. That teacher who said, we're going to measure the field and determine whether the field is a parallelogram. I was that teacher. And suddenly I become that teacher who just opens the textbook and just goes through bam, bam, bam. Okay, class over, goodbye. The kids can tell. And if we don't do something about that, our kids will switch off. And then all that we want to do will never happen. Curriculum. We need to have well-evaluated tests. I remember feeling such horror on hearing that there was a text that was floating around the GES where a student or a child's body was depicted and there was an arrow pointing to the head. And it said, what is the head for? And it said the head is for carrying load. Not even the head is for carrying a load. The head is for carrying load. If that's what the head is for, what on earth are we doing here? We don't need to go to school to carry a load. What is happening to those who evaluate our texts? And I would challenge those in schools as well. The fact that something is approved does not mean it's okay. You need to look at it as well. We need to look at it as well and ask ourselves if it is appropriate. Support tools and resources. We've talked about relevant and timely ICT tools. Class of 97, where are you? I see 2 members over here. Can we give them a huge round of applause? Class of 97 have wired our school. The entire school. Very soon, our students and our teachers will have email addresses that are all part of the Google Suite. Teachers have been trained by them, and they've supported the school massively. This is a huge step forward, and we're excited that you guys are going to hand over on Thursday. We need to have administrators and teachers who think about balance and experiences, not just what we teach in the classroom and not just what leads to exams, but outdoors education, hands-on. Us asking the question, how is this child intelligent? Instead of assuming every child must be analytically intelligent. If you're not a sciencey person, you're not intelligent. But we know that there are different kinds of intelligences. How are we educating our teachers and administrators to take this into account? so that that child who's on the sports field, we just don't say that that child is a good sports person or a good soccer player. We say that child is very intelligent on the sports field. What have we learned from the pandemic? A whole lot, and we must not forget it. Alumni relations, we're here because we love our school, and we need to continue to inculcate a love for the school even before students leave. Students, you don't have to leave before you think of giving the school a gift. Right? While you're there, you can think about something that you can give to the school that will stay there in perpetuity. We need to embrace new ways of supporting the school. We need to be creative about the list that we share with the alumni. And on this note, I want to say a big thank you to Mrs. Marjorie Afeni, to say a huge thank you to you. Class of 75 and 85 looked at the list that all of us must have gotten, and we weren't too excited about what was on the list. We were rather excited about the Arboretum. And we went to her and we proposed that, can we not do anything on the list? Can we do this other one? And she was amazing. And looking at that and seeing the value that would be brought to the school. So flexibility, adaptability, creativity, the ability to open your mind to new ideas that maybe may not have popped up on the list, and we thank you for this. We have traditions here that are amazing, but what should we keep? What should we discard? What is holding us back, and what is likely to move us forward? Associations that allow us to collaborate with like-minded schools towards the goal of enriching our schools. And we have Every Girls and Infantsipim here. That's an excellent example of that. Local and international partnerships as well. Lest we think this is all quite impossible, because we can cite so many constraints. Adidas, the shoe company, in 1974 launched a series of ads beginning with the great Muhammad Ali, who actually coined the phrase, impossible is nothing. Education is too important for us to stop trying, becoming relaxed in the status quo, taking the easy way out. When there's a failure in the mining industry, when 5 people die in a mining accident, it's called a disaster. And a lot of things stop right there, and evaluations are made so that they can stop this from happening again. Every year we fail many students. It's akin to dying. Our students are dying, but I don't sense any urgency. We sort of just assume, oh, some must fail. Why? And we need to be asking ourselves that question. Is it because we're not teaching them the way that they will learn? Have we assumed that they cannot learn? And that is wrong. Step by step, like a chess player that plans its moves 10 steps ahead, we need to be doing that. We may not be able to accomplish everything now, but with a plan to say, you know what, in 10 years this is what we'll have, we can do that, executing one step at a time. Great schools become great schools because they plan to be that way. And Achimota, how many firsts we had, the boldness with which the vision became a reality. And we're standing on such solid ground. People believed in the vision of Achimota School. There's one of our Akan proverbs, an old lady cooked stones till it turned to soup. Impossible is nothing. Thank you very much for your time. Dr. S.K.D. Asante, President of OAA, Accra Costa NSIT, fellow speakers, distinguished guests, fellow members, good evening. I am delighted to be here to share my thoughts on how we can transform Ghana's educational system to meet the changing demands of the world. And I would like to thank the executives of the OAA for giving me this opportunity. Education, we know, is very important. And it's important because it is a major source of labor productivity at the individual level. And that reflects in the earnings of people. And at the national level, education is also important because it's been seen as a major promoter of growth and a main driver of health outcomes and life expectancy. Narrowing it down to secondary education. Secondary education is particularly important because it serves as a link between primary or the basic education and the tertiary education. And like we are all aware, this is a time when we find students tasting a bit of freedom for the first time. So they taste freedom in academics and then they taste freedom socially. And so this stage is really, really crucial. This stage also begins the preparation of students for the labor market, and especially for the students who drop out after secondary education. We need to be we need to pay very particular attention to them. Secondary education also creates growth opportunities for students. They create growth opportunities because this is where most people meet their lifelong friends and they are able to network. And therefore, it's very important that we take secondary education seriously. Now, as we try to take secondary education seriously, we see that many countries are also finding ways to make secondary education very accessible to all. And a typical example is Ghana. We see that there is this free SHS, which is actually making secondary education accessible. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is whether accessibility is reflecting inequality. And if we look around, I'm sure we'll be able to find better answers. And also whether the education that we are getting currently is relevant for the society. Now, when we speak about the world of education, there are various partners in there. And like my senior press have already said, there are the teachers, there are the learners, the parents, the resources are also partners in a way. Ministry of Education in the context of Ghana and the Ghana Education Service. So the teachers are the providers of knowledge, the learners sort of are the recipients of this knowledge, and then we have the parents who support the learners. And then the Ministry of Education being the policy makers and Ghana Education Service being the implementing agency. And therefore, if we want to think about how to transform Ghana's educational system, it's really important we focus on all these players in the world of secondary education. Now, I need to make a case for why we need this transformation. And one main reason why we need to transform our secondary education is the fact that there has been some sudden desire for learning by all. And like I said earlier, we see that reflecting in the global world where countries are placing a lot of emphasis on access to education. And so there's a lot of pressure to provide learning for all. But the question again is whether this learning is relevant for the current society that we are in here. we see in our system that through the introduction of the free SHS, for example, we have seen access doubling, but we have also seen quality go down as measured by the pass rate as well. And so we need to ask ourselves that if quality is actually going down, then there's a question of relevance that is embedded in there. And that's why we need to start thinking about how we can transform our educational system. There's also a second reason about changing the changing nature of the world of work. We see now that jobs that didn't exist before are currently in existence. And then we know that in the future, we are going to also have to see new jobs. We also see businesses around starting to reduce cost and wanting to remain competitive. And they are now developing more flexible employment patterns. And so the implication of this is that young children can no longer plan their career based on the assumptions that were valid in the past. And they need to be able to have the required skills to be able to remain or to be able to be mobile in the labor market. They need to also realize that learning cannot end with just a certificate, and therefore they need some soft skills to allow them to survive in the future labor market. There are currently some challenges in our curriculum, and that those challenges actually makes it worse for the marginalized. Our curriculum is still the traditional kind of curriculum that doesn't give room for any training in personal initiative. And so it's very important that we think about how we can transform our educational system, especially knowing that the public sector can only accommodate 2% of graduates from tertiary education. Now, the next reason why we need to transform our educational system has to do with the fact that science and technology is developing and is almost taking over the world as we sit here. And so that is really affecting what is being learned and how it is actually being learned. And there are currently vast majority of jobs and services that would require a lot of technology, and therefore it's important for our students now to be able to develop the kind of skills that would make them survive in the jobs currently and in the future jobs. We also need people who can manage, develop and invent the systems that are driving these processes, and therefore we need to be able to transform our educational system. Now, in my days, I was told that I belong to the modern group, but I can say here that in my days, people could just move through the world without necessarily getting associated with technology. People could survive without watching televisions, without using computers because there were very few computers, without using tablets. But the children or the youth that we have today are tech babies, and they only take or mostly take with technology. And so because technology appeals to the interest of the youth today, it is very important that technology is introduced in their learning process. Now, we also have a different generation of secondary school learners, and we can't continue to do things the same way as we were doing before. And whilst I was getting ready to come here, I asked my 9-year-old daughter to accompany me here, and then she asked 3 questions. Where are we going? What are we going to do? And how long are we going to be here for? In my days, if your parents asked you to accompany them somewhere, you would have no business asking all these questions. All I'm trying to say here is that the character of all the children that we have today is completely different. They are assertive, they are curious, and they like to participate in a lot of things. And most importantly, they are liberalists who like to take actions based on what they think is good and not based on what society necessarily thinks is good for them. And therefore, it's important for us to guide them as we try to educate them so that they don't lose their way. Now, in terms of the political economy, we see, or I have at least been around long enough to see changes in the structure of our education to suit political ambitions. As one of the senior press said, we haven't had a lot of stability in our educational system. We've shifted from the GCE O-level, A-level, to the GHS/SSS, and we've also seen a complete overhaul of our curriculum. So these are all the issues that makes us want to think that we need to be able to transform our secondary education. And so how are we going to be able to do this? I am suggesting a few things here. I'm suggesting that we are able to use some digital learning tools in the classrooms. I studied geography, economics, and mathematics while in Achimota School, so I was in arts too. And I found it very difficult to relate to subjects like geography, because in geography we were meant to be learning coastal landforms, types of rainfalls, and all those other topics. And that was very difficult because I only had a textbook to read, and I didn't have any option as a visual learner. If I had access to technology then, it would have been easier for me to relate to things like rainfall, the types of rainfall. It would have been easier for me to relate to coastal landforms and how volcanoes erupt, etc. I found it particularly difficult, and so I'm suggesting that we should be able to introduce digital learning tools in the classrooms. I'm thinking about having projectors that would show images when subjects like geography are being taught, having screens, having smart boards, having all those things in the classroom that would make the classroom look attractive and would make learning easier and participatory. I'm also thinking of Achimota School, or I'd love to see our schools having e-libraries and not just concentrating on the physical location where you have to always visit a physical location for library time or something. So you have an e-library that would have all the resources that you need as a student to be able to facilitate your learning. I'm also hoping that we will be able to use a lot of artificial intelligence that we are seeing now in our educational system. And that obviously will help customize learning. I heard Dr. Sean speak about bringing everybody together, or sort of boxing everyone together in our learning environment. It is important that we use artificial intelligence to help us, or to customize the learning, to separate those who are able to do better from those who are struggling, so that learning can be facilitated. Now, learning becomes relevant if there's inclusivity, and so we should ensure some standardization in our educational system. And therefore, in that, I am suggesting that we have learning platforms across all secondary schools. So of course, that would come with establishing or instituting some facilities for all secondary schools that would have the same materials, have access to the same materials, so that somebody living in Accra would have the same resources as somebody living in a village somewhere. Now, we need to also add some soft skills training and mentorship in our curriculum. And with that, I I'm expecting that we would be able to have a lot of industry engagement. There are so many mentors around. We include mentors in or mentorship in our curriculum so that the students can have some soft skills and be able to take personal initiative. Now we need a long-term development strategy for secondary education to prevent political interference. It's also important to note that technology is a tool and not an end. And therefore, the educators also have a role to play in all of these. And so I'm suggesting that we help or we assist the teachers and help them with training so that they will be able to train our new crop of learners. I know that there are potential challenges with the use of technology in school. And one of the main challenges has to do with the fact that if we utilize a lot of technology, it can widen inequality gaps because students that are coming from a poor background may not necessarily have access to the resources. And that's where Achimota School comes in here, and that's where all the requests come in here. They can come in to support the students in there with some of these materials. And we also foresee, or I also foresee that when students use technology in class, they become hyperactive, and that's where we need to be able to control them. So all these arguments are valid, but we have to be mindful that no innovation occurs without any cost. And we can't say that we would not take technology seriously because of all of these costs. Now, what has Achimota School got as far as this transformation is concerned? I would say that Achimota School has got the people. And the people speaks volume. It's got the people because the people have got the money to support the school. It's got the people because the people can provide the mentorship that we need for our students. It's got the people because the people can help institute scholarships for our brilliant students. We've also got vast land, and like our previous speakers just said, we can utilize something like the arboretum for some learning to create a different environment for learning to take place. We can also partner, so as a press, we need to be able to partner with the school. We shouldn't leave the school, the running of the school to just the administrators, but we should help and provide the needed support to make education better in Achimota School. Now we've got the people, but the people have also got people. And what I mean by that is that we can, as a press, we can leverage on our network to be able to overcome the potential constraints that come with educational policies. I thank you for your attention.